Let's talk about what happened on January 6th. Feels a little weird. We're very far out. You thought that, under Trump, we're going to stop talking about the J6 panic. But something I've noticed is that they talk about J6 quite a bit too. The way J6 was presented is J6 is like the liberal, the liberal crisis. They're the thing that they just can't keep bringing up. But Donald Trump, on his own initiative, started a new Jan 6 committee in July of this year. And this was meant to see if they could unearth anything so Trump could give the narrative that he wanted, that he's been giving back since 2023. And that narrative that Trump has been giving back since 2023 was that, well, basically J6 was a con job.
A curd is a curd.
Thank you for the $2, JP. That J6 was an attempt to invalidate his movement, and not only invalidate his movement, but it was meant to cover up the steal. See, J6 has different lore depending on what camp you come from. If you come from, the Democratic camp, if you come from the liberal camp, if you come from the camp of somebody who was, maybe, somebody that was there, and I was there, I did see it happen. And it's, a bunch of rowdy people thought the election was stolen. They had been hyped up and told that it was. They were lied to. And off that lie of thinking the democracy was going to die, they took action that was radical, but in their own minds, they thought that they were saving their democracy, confronting the deep state, stopping the steal, as the name of the rally was. Now, did all of that make sense when it comes to the actions taken on the ground? Not necessarily. I remember watching them assault the press and smash their cameras because they called them rioters. Seems kind of contradictory to trying to send the message that you're not a rioter by smashing press gear, but, they got them angry. And so to me, this was Donald Trump trying to leverage power as he sat on his ass for a few hours, sipping Diet Cokes on the couch while watching the news, seeing the riots, seeing what these rioters are doing, before eventually telling them to go home. But I mean, they were already causing noise while he was still posting about Mike Pence, which is why they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." So to me, it was an attempt by Trump to leverage that violence in order to intimidate those on the Hill to overturn the results of the election. It did not work. It did not succeed. And since then, the pathway that they tried to take with the false elector scheme did not work. It did not work. And not only did it not work, but they've also padded up the system a bit to make it so that you can't use the route that Trump was trying to use, which seems like a bipartisan acquiescence to the fact that, well, no, that isn't a legitimate way to become president, sir. That what he was trying was an illegitimate way to become president of the United States. Not through vote, but through changing the people who are counting the votes and are doing the votes in Congress by changing the electors. So that's how the left sees it. But from Trump, and the narrative he's been trying to establish for years now, is that January 6th is, not all that bad when it comes to their side. What it was is it was a Fedsurrection. Is that the feds planted a bunch of operatives in the crowd. They dressed like MAGA people. They were the one who pulled down the gate and started the event, even though we have tons of footage showing it was Proud Boys, many of whom who were charged, who were the first ones to tear down the gate. They were the ones that smashed the windows. They were the ones that stormed in and got violent with police officers and XYZ. And where was Ray Epps? This is the talk that I've seen from the right, and I've seen Trump speak to. When he says that January 6th was an attempt to cover up the steal, that's what he's referring to. And now Donald Trump is taking a victory lap after the J6 committee released some documents, and the head of the J6 committee, a representative from Georgia, framed those documents in a certain way. Here's the Dallas Express. It's also being reported by The Blaze, and one more right-wing outlet. FBI embedded 275 plainclothes agents in January 6 crowds, Blaze reports, as House panel probes informant's roles. Representative Barry Loudermilk, the representative from Georgia, chairman of the House January 6 Select Subcommittee, said this week his panel is focused on the number enrolled of paid informants present during the January 6, 2021 demonstrations, and whether intelligence from those sources was properly shared with law enforcement. One thing that we have learned, and this came on the tail end of the Biden administration, when the Department of Justice admitted that they had many, I mean more than 24 paid informants embedded in the crowd. With that many paid informants being in the crowd, we want to know how many were in the crowd, how many were in the building. But I also want to know, were they paid to inform or instigate? So to be clear, they haven't found that there were agents paid to instigate. They haven't found that there was an agent that smashed up any window or did XYZ. What they're saying is that they found, just found, mind you, is that there were 275 plainclothes agents. Separately, the Blaze, this is a separate report, on September 25th, 2025, citing a senior congressional source, that source is kept private, that the FBI told Congress that it had 275 plainclothes agents in the January 6 crowd. The Dallas Express has not independently verified that figure. Kind of important note. The outlet wrote that depending on how one reads undercover agent versus plainclothes agent, both statements could be true and didn't publicly identify its source. Now, the thing that's interesting to me is that a lot of what's being discussed here, just to be blunt, just to cut to the case, is stuff that we already knew. For example, when we're talking about the Biden administration admitted that, oh, there was these agents. What were these agents doing? They did admit that this was happening during the Biden admin, that there were agents there. They didn't say how many agents, but they did say that there were FBI agents, federal agents, at the January 6 Capitol riots. But they also said that there were no FBI agents at the January 6 riots who were undercover. So yes, they had FBI agents, but no, they were not undercover. And so still, we have no evidence that FBI agents went there, incited, smashed windows, did the things that they have been accused of doing, that Ray Epps has been accused of doing as an FBI agent, even though, again, we don't have proof that he's an FBI agent. A Justice Department watchdog found that there were no FBI undercover employees at the U.S. Capitol at the January 6th riot, rejecting speculation from allies to President Trump. The DOJ Inspector General said Thursday that while no undercover agents were at the rally, 26 confidential human sources, this is what we're talking about, confidential human sources, people who are informants or paid FBI informants, were in Washington that day, none of whom were authorized to break the law. So yes, we had informants. Yes, they were in the Capitol. No, they did not incite. No, they did not have authority to break the law. If they did break the law, that would have been outside of the authority and a purview that they were given. So the information is being talked about. FBI agents already being there. We knew that for a bit. And the idea that there were confidential informants there, we knew that. So none of this is new information. This is all old information that's being given a new coat of paint, being talked about in a different way, and now people are reposting old J6 videos saying, oh, I bet that was one of them. Oh, I bet that was one of them. One of those agents who were planted there. And now the way that they're describing it is not that there were 275 FBI agents there and there were about 24 human informants. They're saying there were 275 agents hiding in the crowd, acting as insurrectionists, acting as informants. They were all planted in the crowd to kind of, follow the events, go around and do things. Maybe they'd smash a window or make it easier for people to go and open a door. That's what the accusation is being thrown around on, that these were all people secretly going around and doing that type of work. That has not been solidified whatsoever. It's not being solidified at all. In fact, let me pull up the way it's being presented. Here is Tim Pool reposting this video from John Strand. This got 5.1 million views. Wow. Congressional source now confirming nearly 300 FBI agents were embedded in the crowd. Again, there's an exact number, but nearly 300 sounds better. Here's one of them breaking into the Capitol and blaming it on an innocent bystander. J6 was a Fedsurrection setup. Just like I said for years, they ruined our lives for a scam. Wow. Now, mind you, Has it been confirmed that anything, like there's been any photo or video proving that this or that specific individual was for sure a Fed, that this guy was a Fed, or that all these people were Fed, or that this report said that this guy was a Fed? No. No, they did not say that. Did this guy even smash the window? No. He was not the one that I know that smashed the window. He was also not the one that corralled all these people in there. Even if he found out that the dude somehow was a Fed and he moved that glass plane out of the way, even if we found that one or two did that, it's going to take more than one or two people to start the giant event that was January 6th. And mind you, if you actually look at the report, here it is. Here is the report that's just being talked about. These plainclothes embedded, they're embedded in the crowd. They're embedded in the crowd. 274. That's how many FBI agents were on the ground. This number includes, and here's the notes. This number includes agents that responded to the Capitol grounds, as well as inside the Capitol. The pipe bombs, remember when the pipe bombs the day from before? The red truck that was believed to contain explosives. So anti-IEDs for the red truck, anti-IEDs for the pipe bomb outside the Capitol and inside the Capitol. That's what we have. So this says, though, responded. Responded. What does that mean, responded? Well, that means that they can't be 274 agents that are confidentially in these organizations pushing them to do things. That means they couldn't have been the ones the day before with the Proud Boys writing in the Discord chat about storming the Winter Palace. All of this dialogue, all of this information has been public court record. You can all go view it yourself if you want to. Hell, much of it's like available on like Wiki and stuff. It's like really easy to find. These are 274 agents that responded to a bomb being placed, what they thought was a second bomb being, well, there was a bomb at the DNC and the RNC, so those bombs, another bomb outside the grounds and inside the building. But nowhere does it say in this report that they incited anything. Nowhere does it say in this report that they acted violently. Nowhere does it say in this report that they were pretending to be rioters or they were doing X, Y, and Z. The only informants is what was reported in December of last year that acted as informants. And again, they stated that they did not have the authority to act and commit crimes in pursuance of an investigation. So they had no authority to attack cops. They had no authority to go in there and smash windows. They had no authority to purposefully try to corral people into there to try to get them to commit crimes. We don't have any evidence of that. But people didn't take the time to go read this, to go look and see if, like, hey, you know, what exactly were these agents responding to? So instead, it is now, there were, and the number, they're not even saying 274, they're saying 300, because they're just rounding it up. 300 plants in the crowd. 300 people is probably enough to start violence. If you have 300 people in the crowd acting violently, trying to push people to get violent, saying, oh, that cop just attacked me, or oh my God, they're about to kill democracy, then maybe you can start something. Maybe you can do something. But that's not what this says. That's not what the report says. And so instead, we got a bunch of people working themselves into a tizzy over what? Over not being able to read, over being kind of illiterate, honestly, over being a little illiterate. It's not nice that it's happening over them being illiterate, but that's where we are. I mean, you got to think, if we're at this stance right now with Tim Pool, listen to what he's saying. Shortly after J6, AOC told on Instagram where she said they were banging on her door and she thought the rioters had made it to her office. Conservatives slammed her as her office is not in the Capitol, even though they were on the Capitol grounds and there were warnings in all the buildings around. That's why she thought the banging on her door was a rioter. At least that's how she tells the story. Conservatives slammed her as her office is not in the Capitol. However, liberals pointed out that there are tunnels that connect them. The only problem, AOC's story took place an hour or so before the Capitol was breached. We joke that she must have had foreknowledge that the riots were going to happen. Maybe it wasn't a joke. So what he's saying is that AOC and Congress people were possibly given foreknowledge that this was going to happen, and they were performatively posting about it an hour beforehand. An hour before what? He says an hour before the Capitol was breached does not mean that was when they warned everybody that something was happening. A police line, multiple police lines were broken through before they got there. So the idea that AOC's timing would be off when it comes to the breaching of the Capitol, that's past the point of the crisis. You've reached full crisis mode by the time they've gotten in the building. But the idea that they would tell AOC, why would they tell AOC? Why would they tell all these random Congress people? And how would it just be that AOC knows, but all the Republican legislators don't know? But all these other people who flipped parties and did the why I left the left either grift or genuineness, why didn't they say anything? There's so many different locations where if this was such a cover-up as Tim Pool's talking about, where we got 300 agents that had to cover it up, a huge crowd that had to cover it up, a bunch of legislators that had to cover it up, and now an institution that has been taken over by the Trump administration, still somehow not being able to find evidence of it, still not able to find evidence that they incited, still not being able to find evidence that it was planned by the government, still not able to find evidence that this was a Fedsurrection. And so instead, we're saying, wow, there were FBI agents in Washington, D.C., the federal capital of the United States and federal land. Oh, my God. While, the nation's capital was being breached and the police were being overwhelmed, federal agents reacted to what? Bombs being planted? Oh, my God. That's great. Must be all feds doing all the... No. There's an easy explanation. There were informants in the crowd, about 24, out of crowds of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. The people that we clearly see on footage inciting and pushing the violence, many of them are high-ranking Proud Boys or well-known public right-wing figures that we can point to, and they have a long record of not being a Fed, but being somebody on the right who might have thought that their democracy was under siege, and therefore they thought they were defending it. If we're being good faith about the intentions of the people involved, and they're not just crazed lunatics that want to take power by any means. And as they went through each police line, it's well documented, there's tons of footage, and we have yet to see any proof brought forward that police incited it, that the feds incited it, or anything close to what Trump has said, which is this is an attempt to cover up the steal. Trump watched for hours. If it was an attempt to cover up the steal, why didn't he crack down right away? If it was an attempt to cover it all up, why didn't he immediately say, okay, before you even get in there, let's send the National Guard. Let's do this. Let's do that. Why didn't he do it? Why did he sit on his ass for hours when he had the authority to act as president of the United States and commander-in-chief? If it's true that this is a big cover-up, why didn't he stop the cover-up when he could? Why did he allow the cover-up to continue and, in fact, continue to tweet about Mike Pence as it went on, after the violence had already begun? Why? Doesn't make any sense, because none of this makes any sense. This is an attempt to take a big critique of Trump and not to flatten it, because many people thought, don't forget January 6th. We need to keep reminding people of January 6th and what happened, and they're going to try to make people forget. No, Trump is simply going to try to swarm the airwaves. So even when he tries to overturn the results of a Democratic election, even when he goes out there and completely disrespects the peaceful transfer of power, he still wants to make that a W for him. He still wants to craft a narrative that makes it so January 6th is him being victimized, as Mike Pence had to scramble as a crowd chanting to hang him stormed the building he was in. He's still the victim. It has to be that, because it's going to come up, so might as well have the response that January 6th, you mean when the liberals? By the way, if this is the case, Trump is the head. He's the president of the United States. How did this entire scheme develop under his nose and he not know about it? And especially, how did he come back into power after it developed under his nose and he still doesn't have evidence for it? This is simply them not wanting to deal with the fact right now that there is a political extremism problem on the right as well, as they constantly talked about, hey, extremism on the left, that's the only real problem. That's how Trump describes it. But if you can point to right-wing violence or instances of right-wing violence, the narrative doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. So Simply make it not right-wing violence. That seems to be the plan. Mind you, the ones who were violent on the day, the people they say they don't want to associate with and they keep declaring feds, they were pardoned universally by the Trump administration. Everybody who engaged in violence on January 6th was pardoned. Everybody. Not only were they pardoned, some people don't realize how well they were treated. They were pardoned, including the ones who injured officers of the law and wounded them in ways that they'll never be able to fully recover from, stormed the Capitol, tried to overthrow our democracy, but they were actually given treatment by the U.S. Marshal Service that's actually quite nice in comparison to what a suspect would usually get. They were getting, you might even call it favorable treatment. As the U.S. Marshal Service prepared for Donald Trump's expected pardon of January 6 defendants, officials went to unusual lengths to facilitate the defendants' travel from the D.C. jail. Newly obtained records show. The records obtained via a Freedom of Information Act request by the ethics watchdog crew are yet another window into the unprecedented nature of Trump's decision to pardon some 1,500 people who participated in the 2021 Capitol siege. They detail how the Marshal Service, law enforcement arm of the federal judiciary, which had the custody of the J6 defendants before and during their trials, was trying to navigate the situation. Of particular note, the records show that Ronald Carter, the U.S. Marshal for D.C., sent an email on January 21st, the day after Trump's inauguration, asking federal judges to issue an order that would allow the government to pay for pardoned defendants' transportation home. It's normally up to defense attorneys to make such a request, not the Marshal Service, which is also tasked with providing security to judges and generally deferential to them. Carter's email is highly unusual. Robert Sindrich, a retired U.S. District Judge in Pennsylvania, told me. Carter then visited the chambers of at least 4 federal judges following the following day to ask them about the status of the January 6th releases after Elon Musk's Department of Doge complained they happened too slowly, that they were going too slow. We've never seen anything like this before, pressuring the court to issue a decision by a certain time, one judge told the Washington Post, which broke the news of Carter's visit to the judicial chamber. Carter's email, which has not yet been reported, was atypical, agreed Robert Lediger, who worked as a supervisory deputy marshal in New York until 2020. As far as the marshals asking for specific language in an order, he said, that's weird. Now, this was stacked on top of pardons for everybody, and violent offenders as well. I mean, there were people all across January 6th who had brought weapons, baseball bats, hockey sticks, metal poles. There were people detained with firearms after. There were people detained with all sorts of different weapons, like pepper spray, aerosol irritants to spray at people. They were armed, expecting some amount of possible violence. And then when that violence came, they engaged on it towards the DC police. And those people who got booked for these things, they're not feds. The ones that got booked for weapons, they're not feds. And you want to know what happened once Trump pardoned all these people, including the violent offenders that J.D. Vance promised on the campaign trail would not happen? Of course we're not going to pardon the violent offenders. We're against crime. But no, it's not that they're against crime. It's just that Trump wants to monopolize crime. What they did is they pardoned J6ers who engage in violence. And what did those people do? They engaged in violence after, including a J6er that days after he was pardoned had a shootout with police. Some people have forgotten about this. I haven't forgotten about it because I remember how wild it was and how much of a, you would think, a PR crisis it would be. His name was Matthew Huddle, and he was killed by police officers in Indiana after he went for a rifle during a routine traffic stop and then was blown away by a police officer. Here's the footage if you don't believe me.
The reason I'm pulling yours for 70 and a 55. Any reason for going that fast today?
No, sir, I was just keeping up with traffic.
Okay, fair enough. You got your license and registration on you?
Can I put it in park?
Yeah. Where you coming from today?
Church and my mom's cemetery.
Okay.
I just want to let you know that I'm a January 6th defendant.
What do you mean?
I stormed the Capitol. I'm waiting on my pardon.
Really?
Yeah, and I can't really afford to get in any trouble right now.
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
I understand.
I am driving without a license right now.
Okay, so why are you doing that then?
Well, I have to. I've been waiting for my hardship license. I just moved back from Idaho.
Okay.
And I had to move back here because my federal case.
Hey, isn't there a question about if you pardon somebody for flagrant violations of the law where they were clearly in the wrong and engaging in violent manners, that maybe they might gain a certain disrespect for the law that'll transfer into little things like I don't need a driver's license, and big things like, well, we'll see.
Okay.
So I'm just in the middle of everything right now.
So with your federal case, why would you have to move back to Indiana?
Well, I had pending traffic violations. I had to live in Indiana in order to qualify for the hardship license, but they didn't tell me that until I got my federal case, so I moved back to get my license.
Okay, so today you're getting off of the verbal warning for the speed. However, you're a habitual traffic violator.
I know.
Which means that you are at a felony status for driving while suspended. So today you are going to come with me.
Well, I can't.
You're going to have to, okay? You're going to.
Again, if this man wasn't pardoned, this would never have happened, and he would still, as of right now, be alive in a cell.
Come with me today, all right?
No, I can't go to jail for this, sir.
You're going to have to come.
Can I get a ride?
No.
Are you sure? I'll violate my...
Just listen to me, okay? Number one, it's a felony offense. There's no leeway with felonies in the state of Indiana. Now, maybe if it was a misdemeanor offense, I could work something out with you, but it's not a misdemeanor. It's a felony offense, okay? So that's why I can't work with you today with it, okay? I understand your circumstances, but you understand that you can't drive, okay? So your driving has resulted into this situation, okay? Now, what I'm going to do, all right, is I'm going to put your information right here for a sec. I want you to turn around and put your hands on. Don't you do it, buddy. No.
I'm shooting myself.
No.
So I said it was a rifle. I misremembered. Of course, this happened, January of this year. Been around a lot of rifles in Ukraine. It was a 9mm handgun, a loaded handgun he was going for. These are the people J.D. Vance said wouldn't be pardoned. They were pardoned. They had no respect for the law. They had no respect for law enforcement. They had no respect for what happened on January 6th, that being a crime. He was rewarded for his actions. He was rewarded on January 6th for his actions by giving him a pardon. But that reward was a curse because he was in no state to be outside of a cell. He was in no state to be engaging with the rest of the public. This guy was dangerous. He engaged dangerously. It seems like he have, not only when we talk about like driving, as the officer was saying, violations, he's a serial offender, whatever. But the main thing, of course, is the fact that he went for a gun. These are the people that we were told would not be pardoned. He was pardoned. And the sad thing is if this guy just didn't happen to get into this shooting, who knows? Maybe this man would have a giant social media following. Maybe he'd be getting rewarded with podcast money. There's a lot of J6ers that are now asking if they can get compensation. Yes, reparations. I'm not shitting you. There are J6ers right now who are pushing the administration to give them reparations, meaning my and your tax dollars after we had to pay for us to fix that mess on the Capitol, to pay for more security, pay for all these people to go out there for snipers during protests because the government got a little shaky about the building getting stormed. Your money is going to pay for them to get compensated for trying to overthrow the government, because either they believed the lie or could not deal with the peaceful transfer of power that every single other president did. That is the conversation that's happening right now. Not whether or not violent offenders should be out of prison, but whether or not violent offenders should be given money and compensation off of the taxpayer's dime. And that's outside of the social clout that they've built. How many times, man, I can't count the amount of times that I'm scrolling on social media and I see some stupid take on my feed, and I'm like, why is this in my For You page? Who is this guy? And I'll click it and I'll see J6 defendant or J6 victim, J6 prosecuted. The most common is J6 political prisoner. as these people are making money off of their crime. It's, you know what this feels like? If I Did It. It feels like that book. It feels like the book released by a football player we shall not name and a star of Naked Gun that we shall not name. The dialogue here isn't just about rewarding these people and giving them social clout, though. It's about a complete rewrite of the history. Right now, MAGA and Trump has for years are rewriting what happened on January 6th, turning it from a day where the president sat by as our nation's capital were attacked, stirred up by lies that he pushed, into a day where the election was stolen from him and that the riot was there just to cover it up. A complete lie based off of a misreading of the documents that they're releasing and information that was already largely public. If you believe this, it's because you want to be lied to. I have an idea. If somebody tries to overthrow the government, they might be dangerous, and we should keep an eye on them. Do-do-do-do.